yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker. Most of you know that. Former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years, long time ago at this point. But thank goodness it enabled me to become a broadcaster for CBS. Announced last week I'll be doing a bunch more NFL games this year, which is exciting. I also have a really cool college slate, which will come out, I would assume, over the next couple of weeks because the season will be here before you know it. So very excited about that. You can always check me out on social media. I appreciate those of you that do. Whatever platform you're on, I'm on, I think, for the most part, at Ross Tucker NFL, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We, the podcast network, is at Ross Tucker Pod, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Been waiting for today because it's our last of the now P4 conferences. Used to be P5. Now it's P4 because the P12 is no more. I guess the P12 is now P2, and I'm tired of saying P. I'm going to move on to my guy, Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Check him out on social media at FBallGamePlan on Twitter or Football Game Plan on YouTube. He's got that terrific draft guide. I think there's a full month where that thing is still very valuable if you haven't ordered it yet. Footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide. To be honest with you, it's kind of cool just to always go back and look at his scouting reports. Even, you know, when some undrafted rookie running back has 128 yards in week 12 and you've never heard of him, Emory has, and Emory scouted him and has a report on him. So these things last forever, but in particular, it's like a guide to have during the preseason games. It really is. It's like a handy guide to have while you're, because you know the starters, and the starters barely play anymore anyway. So it's like, who are these down the line guys? So it's awesome. I love this show. Before you know it, next week, we will be talking about the other conferences. And by that, we mean primarily the group of 5, as well as some of the FCS prospects that Emory is excited about. And then we'll take a holistic view, and then we'll have games. It'll be week 0, and we'll have games, and Emory will be making his picks against the spread, which is always a ton of fun. You know, Emory, I feel like a lot of years there aren't that many good quarterback prospects coming out of the SEC. You know, it usually feels like it's other conferences that have the top high-end quarterback prospects. But this year, I mean, you can make a case for a lot of these guys. And, of course, Texas and Oklahoma coming into the conference helps quite a bit as well. Is there a guy out of Jalen Milroe at Bama, Carson Beck, Georgia, Quinn Ewers, Texas, Brady Cook, Missouri, or even Graham Mertz at Florida? Is there a guy out of that group that sort of really jumps out to you, or you thought separated themselves as a prospect from the others?
One, I think Jalen Milroe is the best QB prospect in the SEC because of the tremendous athleticism, the upside, the growth he showed last year, not only just from throwing the football at many different levels. He was the best deep ball passer in college football last season, one of the best deep ball passers in college football. But you saw him manage situations better than he did the year prior. There were significant questions about him in 2022 that we didn't see pop up in 2023. Now, you hope with Kalen DeBoer working with him, like what he did with Michael Penix, you want to see even more growth this season. You know, I thought he outplayed Carson Beck in a head-to-head game in the SEC title game. So, to me, Milroe is the number one guy. But the guy no one's talking about is Brady Cook. Like, Brady Cook has been excellent for Missouri. I am a big Brady Cook fan and what he's bringing to the table from an athleticism standpoint, from a decisiveness standpoint, from a short memory standpoint. I think this dude really can find himself climbing up a lot of people's rankings throughout the course of the season. Brady Cook plays high-level football, and that's a big reason why I'm a big fan of what Missouri offensively brings to the table this year. I think no one's talking about Missouri, but Brady Cook is a definite prospect in my opinion.
Okay. Why do you think he's not getting love, Emory? Why do you think there's not as much buzz about Brady Cook?
How can I say this diplomatically? Well, folks have to really just focus on the tape and not what's being said around social media, or because everyone always had, we talked about this last episode with folks speaking how everyone now all of a sudden has Ashton Genty as RB1 when they didn't even mention his name last season, and he was Mountain West Conference Player of the Year, and no one talked about him as, man, you better keep an eye out for the Boise State running back. Same thing with Cook. Everyone talks about his receiver as if the ball just magically pops in his hands, with great placement and accuracy, and no one talks about the guy throwing him the football. So I feel like folks just have to really focus on what they're seeing and not what they're hearing. If people could just really block out the noise and just watch the film as they say they do, they'll come away with, hey, man, this dude actually can throw the heck out the football.
The Jalen Milroe thing is fascinating because, Emory, last year I did that Ole Miss Bama game, and the game before he had been benched. He had been benched against South Florida the game before, and by the way, they won that game like 7-0 or something crazy. I can't remember what the exact score was, but they couldn't move the ball a lick. They played the other two quarterbacks, not Jalen Milroe, against South Florida. The other two guys struggled mightily. They came back to Milroe for the Ole Miss game. And, my observation was that he was still at that point figuring out the quarterback position and that offense under Tommy Rees at Alabama, but a ridiculous athlete. Like as a runner, his arm, and then I think over the course of the year, as he got more experience, he got more reps, he got more comfortable in Tommy Rees's offense. By the end of the year, he was playing at a really high level, and now he's talked about as a potential first-round pick. I mean, the guy got benched week 3 last year because I think they won a game, lost to Texas. He was benched, and then they brought him back for Ole Miss, and then they ended up making the college football playoff.
Yeah, and if you watch the A&M game, you're like, man, this dude really is making some impressive throws deeper down the field. And a lot of times you're watching thinking, because it's hard for folks to get rid of what they saw last or what was really like a core memory. And we all saw 2022 is like, man, this guy has a long way to go. And then when you combine that with him getting benched, right, wrong, and indifferent for that South Florida game, but on the other side of it, they needed him to get to the postseason, and he answered the call each and every game. And so, when you think about him making that jump, the mentality that you have to recognize, okay, I see why I got benched. I'm going to show you now that I'm going to go out there and work on my game. It's no different than what Jalen Hurts did when he got benched for Tua. And then in mop-up duty the year that same or the next year, when he got a chance to go in mop-up duty, you saw him solely work on, let me just play from the pocket because I know I have the athleticism in my bag, and got better. So then when he transferred to Oklahoma, he put up, if Joe Burrow didn't put up his record-breaking season, look who finished second in the Heisman Trophy. It was Jalen Hurts. And go look at his numbers. It was dumb insane, right? So that's the type of stuff that I saw from Milroe, and I'm excited to see how he does this year, knowing that, hey, people are counting him out. There's no Nick Saban. Alabama may be off. Everyone's talking about Georgia and Texas. So this is the type of guy you want to see kind of continue to grow and develop, because he flirted with coming out last year to the NFL. And I think that would have been, a disservice to him, because now he could stack on a solid finish and see if he could put together a full season of what we saw on the back end of 2023.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. And, just from an NFL player perspective, you love to see a guy that overcame adversity like that already, right? Because if you're going to be a quarterback in the NFL, especially as a rookie or early, you're going to face adversity. And there are guys that college goes so well for them so easily that they don't handle it real well when they get to the NFL and there's adversity. But Milroe, he's already kind of been there, done that. Is there a guy, just out of curiosity, Emory, that he reminds you of in the NFL? I'm trying to think of who he could be like, of some of the guys.
It's tough because he's so unique in what he does. I know people want to say Lamar Jackson. He's probably as explosive as Lamar, but Lamar was more refined as a passer.
Maybe a little smaller but faster Anthony Richardson?
Could be, but yeah, and Richardson had a smoother, release and was able to throw with touch. That's the one thing you want to see Milroe add to his game, right? Because everything I feel like does come out like a fastball.
Yeah.
So it's unique. He has a little bit of everybody game that you kind of could, piece together.
Let's move on to another quarterback. But before we do, I got to tell you, since it's Daddy Soda time on this show, man, I took down a lot of Labatt Blue Lights this weekend. It was a good weekend at the Jersey Shore for your boy. That is my beer of choice. It just has that flavor to it, that taste. It's delicious. Love living life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Okay, let's get to Carson Beck, Emory. I did one of his games last year as well. Obviously, he was taking over for the young man that went out to L.A. with the Rams, who you were a big fan of, by the way, who's back. I don't know what happened with him last year, but Stetson Bennett. But what about Carson Beck? He was pretty impressive last year, Emory.
Yeah, solid guy, operates the offense, does checks boxes in terms of what he's supposed to do at the position. You worry about the deep ball accuracy and being consistent there. He has a good arm, but I feel like when going deeper down the field, he pulls a string a little bit on it and doesn't really get it out there. And he's not as accurate going deeper down the field. He can live in the short to intermediate area. I like to see his placement tighten up a little bit moving forward. And versus the better defenses, you want to see him have a plan. He's not the dynamic athlete that we're talking about with Milroe, but you want to see some decisiveness in him being willing to take off. That's the difference between him and a guy like Brady Cook, who will be willing to take off. Like, all right, I don't see nobody open, I'm gone. Let me get these cheap 5 or 6 yards. You want to see that more from Beck, because Beck can, string together some nice passes. He can move the offense down the field. But in order to really push Georgia over the top, he has to play above the X's and O's, and that's the part of his game I want to see him grow and develop a little bit more this upcoming season, because he's going to have to, based on how difficult now the SEC has gotten. Even though they have a stacked team, I'm talking about what the Texas is and what we expect from Alabama, and there's no divisions now, so the top 2 teams will have to come out on top in order to get to the title game.
What about and I think Beck, you hate using this expression because it's overused. He kind of is. He's a better athlete, I think, than he looks. I think He can get you 5 to 10 yards if he needs to at times. He just really doesn't want to. That's like a last resort for him. What about Emory, Quinn Ewers from Texas? What an interesting career. Went to Ohio State for a year for reportedly big NIL money, then left to go back to his native Texas. Wasn't great 2 years ago. And last year he had a really good year, including that game against Bama. He also had some loaded receivers that he was throwing. I mean, the tight end and those receivers were all awesome.
And he reloaded that receiver too. Isaiah Bond coming from Bama to Texas is going to be another phenomenal NFL prospect. We'll talk about, down the line. But yeah, Ewers is someone you also, just like Beck, you want to see him become more consistent throwing the deep ball. I know that was a point of contention with Texas fans. You want to see that part of his game be a little bit better. It's in his bag. You saw some of it last year. especially against Bama, but you want to see it more consistently. That was a whole thing with A.D. Mitchell last year. Like, man, he's open a lot, but you got to get it to him. And we said this before. He reminds me a lot of Kevin Cobb and how he throws the football, how he's built. You want to just see him start to do the things that you saw him do last year more consistently. And everything is still pretty much intact for Texas. They could make a deep run. I think they'll get to the playoffs, might even win the SEC in doing so because of how balanced they are on both sides of the ball. But Ewers can really take the next step, and we can stop talking about his 5-star status if he puts it all together this season in what should be his last year with the Longhorns.
Who do you think is a better prospect, just out of curiosity, Ewers or Beck?
I would lean more toward Beck because Beck has the stronger arm. Beck can do things that Ewers can do. They both have the question marks in the same area, but I feel like Beck is a little bit more capable of hitting those NFL throws more so than Ewers.
Last quarterback, Graham Mertz, Florida, still in college.
And when you watch Florida last year and you're watching the running backs or you're watching any position, you realize, like, Mertz actually played well last season. He's not a bad QB. And so I feel like Mertz is another one of these guys that may go into, early day 3 or mid day 3 and come out playing some as a rookie because he does a lot of things rather well. He has good mobility, throws with some velocity, can throw well on the move. And I feel like Florida can have, an underrated season this year based off the play of Mertz, who didn't play terrible last year. He's not a bad quarterback. I know we talked about core memories. People forget they're stuck on his Wisconsin days, but Mertz actually played really good football last year.
Let's talk about some of these other guys around the SEC because they are loaded. How about a couple linebackers to start? James Pierce from Tennessee and Harold Perkins from LSU.
Yeah, Perkins is explosive. He's dynamic. He's not Micah Parsons because Parsons is a bigger athlete, but Perkins, to me, could be a Quincy Williams type player in the NFL. I think that's a really good comp for Harold Perkins. Pierce he's so comfortable on his feet and comfortable with his athleticism. If he uses his hands even better this year, he'd be a dominant player. He's a very good player. Reminds me more of Leonard Floyd than anybody, but I like how easy he's able to control his body for such a larger athlete. You could drop him in coverage. He's able to pick balls off. He moves well with his change direction skills. I love Pierce's athleticism and his knack to getting to the quarterback. If he uses his hands more, he'd be a dominant player this year.
I didn't realize his true freshman year, Emory. I didn't realize Harold Perkins was not a big guy. I mean, he was making so many plays off the edge and as a blitzer. I thought he was like Micah Parsons. I didn't realize he's an undersized guy. Like, he's got to be an off-the-ball backer, I think. And I want to study him a little bit more to see how well he reads things.
It's funny because when you watch him play, and you're right, the freshman year he was sack master, and then we all just assumed that was going to carry over into next season. And then LSU was like, you know what? Let's put him at deep safety. Let's put him at punter. Let's put him everywhere but edge rusher, right? And I feel like that's they wanted to see how versatile he was. Try to give him that Isaiah Simmons type role, but also to keep him there for the whole season because of his undersized nature. But in college, it kind of works. Like, just leave him where he's dominant at. But I guess preparing him for the pro game, he's playing a little bit more off ball. Now, he could run with anybody, but, man, you kind of want to see him do the one thing that you fell in love with him doing, and that's getting after the quarterback.
So there's some other really good prospects. Luther Burden from Missouri had a huge year last year, the wide receiver.
Yeah, he might be the number one receiver in the class. He's that dominant. He's a fantastic guy, can track the ball, catch it at its highest point, check out all those boxes from an athleticism standpoint, has a great sense of timing. So he is the true alpha at the position in this class.
Wow. Is it not a great year for receivers compared to recent years?
It probably is. I'm speaking in terms of what he can bring to the table. So if you drop him in last year's class, he'll be up there with the receivers that we talked about last year and having these 80 grades or above. So he is someone that is a bona fide stud. at the position.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching him this year. All right. What about the big man, Emory, at Kentucky? Deone Walker, I think he's like 350, 360. You rarely see a guy, especially in college, but at all, that big that still has those stats that he has. I mean, he was productive even at that size.
Remember how back when Tennessee had Haynesworth, and also Henderson.
John Henderson.
Yeah, it's like crazy how big those guys were and how agile they were. That's what I see from this one, in terms of how he's able to continue to move while working upfield. He's able to disengage quickly, and this is the type of nose tackle you take in the first round because of what he can do from a pocket collapsing standpoint, his eye recognition, and how he uses his hands. He is a blue chip player, as they like to say in the scouting world, coming out of Kentucky.
Emory, my second start ever was for the Cowboys against the Jaguars. And I broke the huddle, and the two D tackles were John Henderson and Marcus Stroud. And they were wearing those teal uniforms, and in the sun, they had their hands on their hips, and they looked like condors. Like they looked like, I came out of the huddle, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. We are not the same species. Like their arms are twice as long. They're 3 inches taller than me. That was nuts. That was intimidating to go against. I mean, they looked like perfection. It was. I had a great game. I just kept cutting them. They're so tall. You know what I mean? Like I just kept cutting them. What about another D lineman, Landon Jackson from Arkansas?
Now, from a pure D-line perspective, I believe he plays a position better than Pierce. Jackson has better technique, in my opinion. He uses his hands well. He's good versus the run and the pass. Think Trey Hendrickson when you're thinking Landon Jackson. I think that's where I'm at with him. I can see some people that can feel like Jackson may end up grading higher than Pierce. Both are tremendous defensive ends. But Jackson, to me, 6'7", 6'6", plays well with his hands, comfortable off the ball, comfortable off his, in space, but also is physical enough to really be a factor versus the run too. To me, he's a first round type defensive end.
Let's talk about offensive line a little bit. There's a bunch of good tackles in the SEC. The kid from Texas, LSU might have the top two tackles on either side, led by Will Campbell, the left tackle, day one starter at left tackle for LSU out of Monroe, Louisiana. That's impressive to start right away as a freshman.
Especially when you consider one of his first games, I believe it was the first game or maybe it was the second game against Florida State. It's crazy to have to start a true freshman there, and you saw him get better as a freshman throughout the season. Emory Jones on the other side is the same way. And so when you think about both tackles of left and right, Campbell, to me, if you want Emory Jones first, cool. If you want Campbell first, fine. Like you can't go wrong with either one. But the fact that Campbell is playing on the left side and got better, I think he plays with really good control. He doesn't quickly try to get out in his kick slide and try to ride the wave. He's patient, so he doesn't leave himself susceptible to inside moves. Emory Jones on the other side is strong at the point of attack. So both guys are really good, rock solid tackles, and it shows you the benefit of playing early as a freshman, growing in your role, and continuing to develop over time.
Yeah, very balanced, very patient. There is some question about his arm length, which is not ideal, but I don't know. He's done pretty darn well with it so far in the SEC. I certainly would give him a chance in the NFL. There have been other tackles that have been able to play at a high level in the NFL without having super long arms. Would you rather have long arms? Sure, but he makes up for it with his core strength. I feel like body control, balance, and you nailed it. Patience. You always nail it. Check him out on social media. The great Emory Hunt at FBall Game Plan on Twitter, Football Game Plan on YouTube, footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide. I am at Ross Tucker NFL. We're at Ross Tucker Pod. As a reminder, you can check us out on YouTube always. YouTube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. We're talking about everybody else next week.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.